Hey everybody, I'm Joe. We're talking about the Marvel Multiverse TTRPG game today, and we're going to be building a new character as of Rules Update 1.3. Here we go. As always, when I am starting a video right now, I like to say that we are building this as of the Rules Update 1.3, and so we might have to revamp this character if there are changes made when the final game is published later this year. Most TTRPGs work in essentially the same way, especially if they are more combat focused. You have movement, you have action, and you might have some kind of an easier type action to do. In the original version of Marvel Multiverse, there was actually the easy action, which has been disposed of, and now those are given to you for free. In D&D, of course, you have bonus actions, and of course, Pathfinder's a little bit different, where you just have a 3-action economy. And so people can move in between different game systems relatively easily because the nature of gameplay tends to be pretty streamlined and similar. It's just the more specific mechanics of how things operate that differentiate them on a kind of larger scale. So the question before us is there a mechanic in Marvel Multiverse that makes it truly different than other games you have probably played? And I believe that there is. The thing that is different mechanically in the Marvel Multiverse game is your ability to increase the number of reactions you have per round of combat. Normally in a TTRPG, you get 1 reaction per round of combat, and as you alter your character and your character grows, you're able to usually utilize your reaction for a larger variety of things. For instance, in D&D, you can take the Warcaster feat in order to cast a cantrip as opposed to a melee attack when somebody leaves your threatened area. However, what you cannot do is increase the number of reactions that you get in a round of combat. Now, this is different in Marvel Multiverse because there are actually a number of ways that you can increase the number of reactions that you get per round of combat. So the question before us is, how good is that? If you are able to utilize multiple reactions per round of combat, how much additional damage can you do? Our goal today is pretty simple. We are going to build a character that is going to exploit this aspect of the rules as fully as possible, attempting to make as many attacks as possible. And it's going to get to a place where we are making 1 attack on our turn and 3 full reaction attacks throughout the rest of a round of combat, which is going to be pretty insane. It's important to know that you have a variety of things that you can utilize your reaction for right out of the gate with any character. In Rules Update 1.3, we had a list of reactions that any character can take, including aiding a teammate, breaking free of a webbing, the ability to ram somebody, which is a mechanic I want to build a character around, and the retaliate reaction. Specifically, the retaliate reaction utilizes your reaction after you've been damaged by an attack to attack the character that just damaged you. Now, this is already built into the game, but I didn't want to rely on it too heavily. But please note that you have that reaction right off the bat at rank 1 with any character. We are going to be expanding on the retaliate reaction quite dramatically, and I'm very excited with where we wind up. So, I'm not that great at naming my characters as always. If you have a better name for this character, pop it into the comments, but I'll be calling this character the Honey Badger. At rank 1, we are not going to do anything particularly special. We're going with an average size character for 25 feet of movement speed. We will be making our attacks using agility, and we are going to take a -4 point buy in our melee in order to have 4 additional points to spend when we do point buy at rank 1. This is a character that is going to wait a very long time in order to have any damage reduction or any particularly great armor classes. So I kind of needed to start bumping resilience right off the bat. We are going to have a -4 in our melee, giving us 6 for the defense there, a 4 in our agility, capping it right away at rank 1, and we're going to have a 14 defense there. We're going to have a 2 in our resilience. That's 12 for that armor class, but also 50 points of health. we're going to take 3 in our vigilance for reasons you'll see later in the build, which is going to give us a 13 vigilance defense and 75 points of focus. And we're going to take 1 point in our ego, giving that a defense score of 11, meaning that our logic is a 0 and a defense score of 10. If you wanted to build this character and put a 3 into resilience for 75 points of health and a 2 into your vigilance for 50 points of focus, and then bump your focus later on in the character build, I think that makes a bunch of sense. But we should be okay at rank 1 with 50 points of health. The power set we are going to be buying into initially is going to be the Blades power set. I've been wanting to do something with the Blades power set for a while and really explore it and see what it can do, because it offers some really good reactions. But we're going to start with Vicious Slash as our first power. Now, Vicious Slash is a very simple attack. It is going to be an attack roll against a single target, taking double damage on a fantastic success and being knocked prone upon a fantastic success, and of course, normal damage upon a normal success. Nothing special here, but it opens up the door to some things we really want. The next power we're going to take is going to be particularly exciting for us at low ranks, and that is Fast Slashes. Fast Slashes allows us to make 2 attacks against 1 target, or 1 attack against 2 different targets, each taking half damage on a normal success, or upon a fantastic success taking full damage. That's fine as far as it goes, but there's an additional benefit here. The additional benefit is if you have a fantastic success, after doing damage to the targets as normal, you can choose a target within your reach. It doesn't have to be one of these first targets that you attacked, and make a bonus single attack against that target. Now, part of the language of Fast Slashes is that it has the same effect. I interpret that to mean that upon a regular attack hitting, they would take half damage and full damage on a fantastic success, meaning that you get a additional attack right away at rank 1, but for less damage. We'll still take it. Since Fast Slashes has a rider that does an additional benefit upon a fantastic success, I don't see how I could get around taking Combat Trickery as our 3rd power at rank 1. You know it, you love it. Once per battle, we get to decide that a particular attack is a fantastic success, which would automatically trigger our bonus attack from Fast Slashes. The trait we are going to take at rank 1 is going to be Signature Weapon. Now, Signature Weapon allows for additional properties of your weapon for you to negotiate with your narrator, but one thing I think we could easily make sure that we were able to negotiate for is making this weapon a +1 multiplier for damage. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to make that happen, and so I will be calculating, especially at these lower levels, that we have a 1 damage multiplier. Now, what does that mean for combat? It means we are going to be using Fast Slashes on round 1, doing Combat Trickery, and making a 3rd attack. And that means that on our first round of combat, we will do 21 points of damage. And on every subsequent round, I can't guarantee that we would be able to use the Combat Trickery bonus attack, so we would be doing 11 points of damage. This is really good for rank 1, and it's only going to get better from here. At rank 2, we're going to cap our agility at a 5. We're going to bring our resilience to a 3, which is 75 points of health. We're going to bring our vigilance to a 4 for 100 points of focus. We're going to bring our ego to a 2, and we're going to bring our logic to a 1. This will give us defenses of 6 for melee, 15 for agility, 13 for resilience, 14 for vigilance, a 12 for ego, and 11 for logic. Now, if you're thinking I'm going to take evasion at this rank in order to shore up the melee defense, I couldn't make it happen at this rank without delaying our ability to utilize our reactions appropriately. I have to delay that, so we are going to be quite susceptible to melee attacks for a while, and it's going to be a weakness of this character. Our first power we're going to take is going to be our first reaction power, and that is Slice and Dice from the Blades power set. This stipulates that when you have a fantastic success against an enemy, you get to utilize your reaction and make an attack. Now, please note that it stipulates that our attack needs to do at least 1 point of damage, and that is a very interesting piece of language. Let's talk about how damage multipliers work. We have right now a 2 from our rank and a +1 from signature weapon, meaning that we are multiplying our Marvel die by a 3. What if we come across an enemy that has a 3 damage reduction ability? Does that mean upon a successful hit, they take no damage? And the answer is no. The reason is that damage is multiplied by taking your Marvel die, multiplying against your rank plus any damage multipliers, and then adding your ability score. Damage reduction happens by subtracting values from the multiplied value in damage calculation. So if we were to run across an enemy with a 3 damage reduction, we would take our Marvel die and then we'd actually be multiplying it against 0. 3 from our damage multiplier minus 3 from damage reduction. That is, of course, going to wind up being a 0, but then you add the ability score, meaning in our case, we would still do 5 points of damage. So even with a fantastic success, if the damage multiplier would take, if the damage reduction would take our multiplier down to 0, we still do damage, and it still triggers Slice and Dice. Now, Slice and Dice is really interesting. What we are able to do is, after making a fantastic success hit against a target, utilize our reaction, make an additional attack, this time against the resilience defense of our enemy, and we get to ignore any damage reduction that they have. And then, of course, it's normal damage on a normal success, and a fantastic success triggers double damage. But what we really care about is that this is triggered by a fantastic success, meaning we need combat trickery on this character. We are going to be going into a new power set at this rank, and we're going to be taking the Battle Suit power set. We're doing it so that later we can take the armor powers in order to increase our damage reduction, but right now we need it for Extended Reach 1. Now, I've talked about this combo on this channel before, but it's probably my favorite combo that is in the playtest rulebook. We are going to be extending our reach by 4-fold. And this means that with an average sized character, you would normally have 5 feet of reach. So our reach with our Battle Suit is now 20 feet. Please note that with the Blade's power set, all of your attacks can be made against enemies that are within your reach. So now you have a 20-foot radius around you that you can make blade attacks with. The last power we're going to take is Whirling Frenzy. Whirling Frenzy allows you to make an attack against every single enemy that is within your reach, which is now a 20-foot radius. They take half damage on a normal success, full damage on a fantastic success. This can be paired with Combat Trickery, and then it can be paired with Slice and Dice. But here's where we get into a rules interaction that has not been formally cleared up. When you make a Whirling Frenzy attack, or any attack against multiple enemies, you roll 1 time, and this is applied against the defense of every one of those enemies. 1 roll from you, multiple attacks that hit. The Slice and Dice power says that you get to trigger Slice and Dice when you have a fantastic success against an enemy. Specifically, Slice and Dice's triggering condition is a fantastic success on an attack using the character's blades, so it must be an attack from the Blade's power set, which Whirling Frenzy is, and this attack must deal at least 1 point of damage, which even with damage reduction, it will do. Now, if we are doing Whirling Frenzy, does this mean that if we had multiple reactions, it could be triggered twice so long as this was against 2 different enemies? The way I read it, the answer is yes. My argument for this is that it is a fantastic success because we rolled once, and provided that we hit 2 different enemies, right, we have an attack against an enemy that has dealt 1 point of damage. As a result, if I use Whirling Frenzy and I hit 2 targets, and if I had 2 reactions, I could use them both immediately so long as I attacked each individual target once. Slice and Dice cannot trigger against the same enemy more than once in a round of combat. I understand the argument that it is a single action or a single power that triggered Slice and Dice, but that's not how the wording of the power reads. If there is an update or a clarification on this, I'll be excited to see it. But right now, provided you have 2 reactions, if you have a fantastic success, I believe Slice and Dice triggers twice. But all of that hinges on having multiple reactions. So right here at rank 2, we're going to take as our trait Combat Reflexes, which provides an additional reaction. Let's take a look at the wording of Combat Reflexes. It says the character has 1 additional reaction each turn. Turn is not round. Let's take a look at page 22 of the original playtest document, and it differentiates rounds and turns. A full round is when every character has a turn in an initiative sequence. Each character then gets to take a turn where you get your movement and your regular actions. The wording of Combat Reflexes indicates that you could utilize a reaction after every single character has a turn, provided there is a triggering event. I believe this language is going to be altered in the final game when it's published later this year, because having potentially 5 or 6 or 7 reactions is enormous. You'd have to have a triggering event, but it means that you could utilize it. I'm going to use Combat Reflexes and assume that it only grants 1 usable reaction per every round of combat, not every turn, because I couldn't calculate how big that could potentially get. So for right now, Combat Reflexes is going to grant 1 usable reaction when I calculate damage at the end of every single rank. But please note that the way this is written, if you have a triggering event after additional characters have turns, you could potentially have more reactions than even I'm calculating for here. So how does combat work for us? We're going to, on round 1, use Whirling Frenzy, and we're going to use Combat Trickery. This is then going to trigger Slice and Dice twice for us. Now, the additional Slice and Dice attacks are not fantastic successes for us, and I will not be assuming that they are. If you get a fantastic success on one of these reactions, well, you're going to be doing even more damage. But right out of the gate, assuming 3 valid targets for Whirling Frenzy and having valid targets for your 2 reactions, you're going to do 99 points of damage on this first round. On subsequent rounds, you're going to do 46 points of damage. This is an enormous scaling, and it's only going to get better from here. Rank 3, we're going to cap Agility at a 6, bring Resilience to a 4, so 100 points of health, bring Vigilance to a 5, so 125 points of focus. We're going to get Ego to a 3 and Logic to a 2, which is going to give us defenses of 6 for melee, 16 for Agility, 14 for Resilience, 15 for Vigilance, 13 for Ego, and 12 for Logic. The first power we are going to take at rank 3 is going to be Focused Fury. Now, Focused Fury is going to be very similar to the way that I built our melee attack character Smash a little while ago, in that you get to expend focus in order to do extra damage upon an attack hitting. If you have a fantastic success, that damage is doubled along with your regular damage. This is why we've been bumping focus this whole time. I want to make sure that we can sustain a high amount of damage output from Focused Fury. Now, the rules for expending focus are that you can spend 5 points of focus for every rank that you have obtained on one particular effect. So right now we can expend 15 points of focus, and with 125 points of focus total, we could max out our damage output in Focused Fury for 8 rounds. Now, we could have taken Furious Slashes on this character, and I chose not to. Furious Slashes allows us to make attacks against 2 different targets, or 2 attacks against 1 target, and we can expend focus, but it is under the same rules of damage, meaning that on a normal success, they take half damage from the focus spent and full damage from the focus spent. This is a good power. It would certainly be something usable, but since we have taken Whirling Frenzy, it would be kind of duplicative, and using Whirling Frenzy without expending focus is still going to be good for our damage numbers. So anyway, it is an option on this character that you could take just to have room for additional reactions. I did not take it. The next power we're going to take is Attack Stance. Now this means that we need to go into the martial arts power set for this rank, so we only get 3 powers. Attack Stance is amazing. It replaces any other damage multipliers, so our multiplier from our signature weapon goes away, but it doubles our rank for the purposes of calculating damage. And this is always superior to the damage multipliers that we would be able to obtain at any given rank. So we're not going to be doing anything that increases damage multipliers for the rest of this character. We will just be using our Attack Stance. It's important to note, by the way, that wording of Attack Stance is from the second rules update. It's not the way you'll see it listed inside of the playtest document. The next power we're going to take is another reaction, and it's Counter-Strike Technique. When somebody does damage to you with an attack, you get to immediately hit them for half of your normal attack damage. And please note the wording here. We did not have to roll to hit them. That's what makes Counter-Strike Technique so special. Someone hits you, you utilize your reaction, and you immediately can hit them for half damage. You could, of course, use the Retaliate ability and make an attack roll, which may or may not hit, but Counter-Strike just automatically works. Please note, for purposes of a power we're going to take next rank, that this is in the martial arts power set. The trait we're going to take here at rank 3 is going to be Signature Attack, which gives us an automatic edge when making one particular attack. We're going to choose Focused Fury. Focused Fury is a great way of doing single target damage, and now we automatically get an edge when doing it. If you wanted to build this character to more reliably do multi-target attack damage, then I would do Signature Attack with Whirling Frenzy. We're going to be using Focused Fury, but go either way that you want to on this. One thing to note, now that we have Focused Fury, which allows us to really increase damage against a single target, and we have Whirling Frenzy, this character is actually amazingly effective at single target damage and multi-target damage. In other words, most characters only do one or the other really well. This character is going to do both. So what does combat look like for us? It's important to note the variety of reactions we have available. We have Slice and Dice, which works on a fantastic success. We have Counter-Strike Technique, and we have Retaliate. We have right now 2 reactions that we can utilize, but that's going to go up next rank. So on our first round of combat, we're going to do Focused Fury with an edge and use Combat Trickery. This is going to immediately allow us to use Slice and Dice as a reaction, and I'm going to assume that we get to use at least Counter-Strike Technique as our other reaction. And so I will be calculating that we're using Counter-Strike Technique damage, which is half damage on that second attack. This round of combat would do 154 points of damage. But let's say that we want to do multi-target damage. We're going to use Whirling Frenzy in that case. We're still going to use Combat Trickery on round 1, which would then allow us to use 2 Slice and Dice reactions, and that means we'd get to do 180 points of damage on the board. Subsequent rounds would not necessarily have a fantastic success, so Slice and Dice would not be triggered, but Counter-Strike Technique could be triggered 2 times. And so on a round of combat that is a normal round using Focused Fury, we would do 54 points of damage, and a normal round of combat using Whirling Frenzy, we would do 67. Please note that we are assuming that we are maxing out the focus that we are expending every time that we use Focused Fury. For rank 4, I have to talk about the trait we're going to take before I talk about our point buy, because we are going to take Enhanced Physique. This increases the cap that you have for melee, agility, and resilience by 1. This will allow us to put a couple points into agility, bringing it to an 8, taking resilience to a 5, taking vigilance to a 6, taking ego to a 4, and logic to a 2. This is going to give us defenses of 6 for melee, an 18 for agility, 15 for resilience, 16 for vigilance, 14 for ego, and a 12 for logic. The first power we're going to take is Do This All Day. I talk about this power a lot. It allows you as an action on your turn to expend focus in order to heal health on a 2-for-1 discount. This is a great way of saving your life in an emergency. I have been waiting this whole time to take Extended Reach 2. I wanted to do it a lot earlier, but I just could not fit it in earlier. Extended Reach 2 takes your reach, and instead of multiplying your original reach by 4, it's now multiplied by 10. So you now have a 50-foot radius around you that you can attack using your blades. This is nearly impossible to get away from as far as your enemies are concerned. The next power we're going to take is Always Ready. Always Ready gives you 1 additional reaction per round of combat that you can use for a power in the martial arts power set. This is why it was so important for us to take Counter-Strike Technique as a reaction, because it is in the martial arts power set. This is going to now give us 3 reactions that we can utilize on our round of combat, so long as one of them is Counter-Strike Technique. The last power we're going to take is Slashback. I really wanted to take this earlier, but it's just, there's so many things that I want to take. Slashback is another reaction from the Blade's power set, so we can't utilize Always Ready in order to initiate Slashback, but we probably will have a lot of cause to utilize this. Slashback has a trigger of when an enemy makes an attack against us that fails, and let's focus on that for a second. Retaliate and Counter-Strike as reactions get triggered when somebody attacks us and does 1 point of damage or more. Slashback is triggered when somebody misses us. So now if somebody targets us with an attack, it doesn't matter if they hit or miss, we will be able to utilize our reaction to attack them back. So now your reaction is going to be triggered more frequently, which I love. The attack you make from Slashback is a normal attack. Normal damage on a success, double damage on a fantastic success, and all of that's great. The real thing that we're here for is the triggering event. So we now have Slice and Dice, Slashback, Counter-Strike Technique, and Retaliate as reactions that we can utilize. Combat, again, is something where you have a lot of choices. Let us say you're using Focused Fury to make your attack. You're going to, for first round of combat, use Combat Trickery. We would get 1 Slice and Dice reaction, 1 Slashback reaction, and 1 Counter-Strike reaction. In a perfect world, of course. And with all of that said, if all of them hit, you'll do 242 points of damage, assuming with Focused Fury that you put 20 points of focus into the attack. Let's say you used Whirling Frenzy as your attack that you're doing with Combat Trickery. This would ideally allow you to then do 2 Slice and Dice reactions and 1 Counter-Strike Technique. And in that case, you would do 258 points of damage if you got to use all of your reactions. On a normal round of combat with Focused Fury, you would be able to ideally do 2 Slashback reactions and 1 Counter-Strike Technique, which would allow you to do 146 points of damage on the board. And on a normal round, when you got to use Whirling Frenzy, this would ideally allow you to do 2 Slashback reactions and 1 Counter-Strike Technique reaction, which would be 144 points of damage. Now, I will not be taking on this character a power called Unstoppable Assault. If you wanted to build a version of this character, it's something you might want to look at. But Unstoppable Assault allows you to attack every enemy within your reach, and you can then make attacks against them like normal. But what this allows you to do then is expend focus to move and attack every enemy within your reach again. In other words, this allows you to move and attack and expend focus each time that you do so. But you can only attack an enemy 1 time using this entire power. Now, this is basically extending in 1 turn the number of enemies that you can attack, and if you needed to reposition, this makes a lot of sense. However, we already have, with our extended reach power, the ability to hit a monstrous amount of enemies, and we don't need to expend focus and move in order to do so. That's why I don't feel on this character I needed to take Unstoppable Assault. One other thing I will not be taking on this character is Defense Stance. So there's Attack Stance and Defense Stance in the martial arts power set. And Defense Stance first gives you the ability to go into your defense stance for free. It's an easy action, which is now free. And then until a first attack actually lands, every attack before that from any number of enemies has trouble. The reason we would take this is for Reverse Momentum Throw. Reverse Momentum Throw is another reaction power. It would allow us to utilize our reaction to attack somebody else, and it would just be another power we could utilize from the martial arts power set. And don't forget that our always ready power only triggers our third reaction if that third reaction is within the martial arts power set. The reason we're not taking defense stance is you can only be in one stance at a time, attack stance or defense stance. I believe we have enough uses of our reaction, from slice and dice to slash back to counter-strike technique to retaliate, that adding another one would be less powerful for us than the attack stance bonus we get to our damage multiplier. We're getting enormous damage output because we get to double our rank. And without attack stance, we only have a +1 damage multiplier, and our damage numbers would tank substantively. If you wanted this character to be more defensive, then defense stance and reverse momentum throw are valid choices on this character, but I will not be taking them. At rank 5, we're going to cap our agility at a 9. We're going to bring resilience to a 6, 150 points of health. Take vigilance to a 7, which is going to then be 175 points of focus. We're going to take ego to a 4, logic to a 4, which will give us defenses of a 19 for agility, a 16 for resilience, a 17 for vigilance, and 14 for ego and logic. Finally, at this rank, we will be taking evasion, which will bring our melee defense to a 19. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and talk about it. The evasion power allows you to use your agility defense for melee attacks, and this is finally going to solve the issue of our armor class for melee attacks. The other powers we're going to take at this rank are pretty boring. We're going to take armor 1, 2, and 3. We were already in the battle suit power set, and these are then easy for us to pick up. This is going to take our damage reduction from nothing to a 3 damage reduction, which can be particularly powerful. We are a high agility character, and I think we should go ahead and really lean into that. So the trait I'm going to take is sneaky. Sneaky means we automatically have an edge on any stealth checks, and enemies have trouble on any vigilance checks to attempt to perceive us. And with our incredibly high agility score, this means that we are basically now going to be a ninja with 50-foot arms. All right, so let's talk about combat. Our first round of combat, if we're using Focused Fury, will allow us to use a Slice and Dice and a Slashback reaction, and ideally a Counter-Strike reaction as well for half damage. And this would give us, if we max out the focus spent, 298 points of damage on the field, which is stupid. If we did Whirling Frenzy with Combat Trickery and we got to do 2 Slice and Dice reactions plus 1 Counter-Strike technique, it'd be 317 points of damage. If we did a normal round of combat without Combat Trickery, for our Focused Fury round, we would be doing 179 points of damage, and if we did it with Whirling Frenzy, it'd be 156. This is assuming that only one of our reactions is Counter-Strike technique for half damage, and the other ones are Retaliate or Slashback or something like that. Let's finish the character off at rank 6. We're going to have a 10 in agility. Please note that for every 5 points of agility, your movement speed increases by 5 feet. So at this rank, we are now able to move 35 feet per round of combat, which is pretty cool. Our resilience goes up to a 7 for 175 points of health. Our vigilance goes to an 8 for 200 points of focus. And ego and logic are going to go to a 5, which is going to give us defenses of 20 for melee and agility, 17 for resilience, 18 for vigilance, and 15 for ego and logic. Let's take a look at the powers we're going to take. The first one is going to be Armor 4, and now we have a 4 damage reduction, which is just useful. We are going to take Grappling Technique on this character. I don't think we're going to use it all that often, but it does allow you to use an attack that then would do normal damage, and it will also be able to grapple the target. We took Grappling Technique so that we could have yet another reaction power and take Spin and Throw. I don't think we're going to use this very much because it does rely on our melee score, but it is a reaction that is triggered by having an enemy grappled. So if we have somebody grappled through Grappling Technique, they have taken damage there, and then we can utilize our reaction to spin and throw them, potentially causing damage to them and another enemy that we're throwing them against. I'm not going to be assuming we use this for purposes of damage. It's just an additional cool thing that we could do. The last power we're going to take is defense stance. I said I wasn't going to take it, but if you are in a position where you need to increase your defense, where you're trying to perhaps defend yourself a little bit better, maybe you're low on health, you can go into a defense stance, which gives every enemy trouble attacking you until the first attack lands. And one thing that you might do if you're in pretty dire straits is use an easy action to go into defense stance and then use do this all day to do some healing with the focus that you have saved. This might save your life, but I'm not assuming that we will be in our defense stance when calculating damage. The last trait we're going to take is determination. Now, determination means that you no longer gain trouble on action checks if you are demoralized. Demoralization happens when your focus hits 0 or a negative number and would normally give you trouble on everything you try to do. You can't expend focus any longer. That still is the core of the rule, but you would no longer have trouble. So go ahead and spend your focus, get all the way down to the wire with it in order to fuel your attacks. At this rank, it won't cause you to have any demoralization effects, which is nice. All right, let's do damage for rank 6, and it's getting ridiculous here. But if you use Focus Fury with Combat Trickery, dumping all the focus you can into it, and getting to utilize a Slice and Dice, a Slashback, and a Counter-Strike technique reactions, you would do 354 points of damage on the board. And that's not assuming that any of the reactions are fantastic successes, which of course would be even more damage. If you're doing a Whirling Frenzy attack and you use Combat Trickery and you get to utilize 2 Slice and Dice and 1 Counter-Strike technique reactions, you would do 376 points of damage on the board. For normal rounds of combat, if you're doing Focus Fury and still putting as much focus into the attacks as you can, utilizing a Slashback or Retaliate and 1 Counter-Strike technique reaction, you would do 212 points of damage on the board. And if it's a Whirling Frenzy round of attacks with the same reactions being assumed, you would do 208, provided that they all hit and providing that none of the reactions are fantastic successes. We set out to ask the question, how good is it to be able to utilize multiple reactions in a round of combat? And the answer is, it's amazing. The damage that you get to do on the board is significant. And yeah, if you use Combat Trickery and you pump a bunch of focus into a focused Fury attack, that's an enormous spike in damage there. But a lot of these are very normal amounts of damage. You're just doing it a bunch and upwards of attacking 4 times in a full round of combat. We did not even assume that you got to do even more additional reactions due to the wording of combat reflexes. But there's an argument that the numbers could be even higher. This character doesn't have a ton of utility. They don't have the ability to fly, they don't have abilities to do interesting problem solving, they don't climb, they don't have a particularly interesting swim speed. They can't help out the party all that much. All they are really is fast with a good agility score, but you get them into combat and with a 50-foot range on their blades, they can attack almost anybody. And they are exceptional at both single target and multi-target damage, and that has to count for something. I love building characters that have problem-solving abilities, and this isn't one of them. But what it makes up for is a sheer unimaginable barrage of attacks that happens throughout rounds of combat. You will not be bored in combat with this character because you're always looking for some excuse to utilize a reaction. So that's the build that we're doing this time. Thank you so much for joining me today. YouTube is literally made out of buttons. I hope you press some of them, and I'll see you next time. All right, peace.